Standing on the beach at Petite Point, a group of settlers travelled to New Zealand on a ship called the Peris. They arrived at Lyttelton and travelled down to Timaru. They built cottages here and the area was known as Peris Town. When the borough of Timaru was formally constituted in 1868, it consisted of three towns: Peris Town, Government Town and Rhodes Town. Looking north along South Beach, it is hard to imagine that none of this shore reclamation was here in the mid-19th century. The beach ran along the base of the cliffs, and once the breakwater was built, the shingle rapidly accumulated. There was lots of controversy at the time as to what the effect of the shingle build-up would be, and how they would dispose of it. In fact, the shingle build-up made the harbour more secure and provided the huge storage area the port has today. Prime Port Timaru has one of the largest storage and support areas of any port in New Zealand. Once the harbour was built, this area was handed to us on a plate. After the advent of Parr's windmill in Rhodes Town, a whole lot of flour mills were constructed along the coast. In the background was the biscuit and stock food factory, and in the building that extends out to the right are large wooden silos that were used to store the various types of grains. The Victorians cunningly used gravity to their advantage. The mills were built at the bottom of the cliff. The grain arrived in sacks and was stored on the top level. In the case of Evans Mill, near the railway station, the milling took place on the next level down. The flour storage was on a lower level, and the loading out took place into railway trucks at beach level. Looking down Mill Street, on the left, is the large Victorian flour mill which is still in use. At the end of this road, on the right, was Timaru's electric power station, using a steam generator from the Christchurch exhibition. The building was originally an oat mill, and after it burnt down, it was reused to house the power generator. The building in the right foreground was the Army Hall, and it was here that many of the early settlers arrived to be allocated their jobs and sections. We are now in Domain Avenue at the southern end of Government Town, outside the cemetery. When they extended the breakwater, the rocks came from a quarry in the Scenic Reserve. There was a railway line which came out of the quarry, down Otapua Road, down James Street and under the viaduct. It went along the South Beach where the rocks were used to build the breakwater. The method of construction for building the eastern breakwater extension was by building three elevated railway lines out to sea and dumping the rocks over the side. It is worth having a look around the cemetery, especially at the graves of some of the notable characters of the 19th century, many of whom are mentioned in this film. The cemetery was part of the south end of Government Town. This is the grave of Dr. Butler, whose dispensary was burnt in the Great Fire of 1868. The small grave is his 3-month-old son Edward, who died in 1864. Captain Kane, who worked for Lacrene and opened a store and landing service in Strathallan Street, poisoned by his stepson-in-law Thomas Hall. Captain Clarkson, Harbour Master from 1887 to 1909. No shipping accidents occurred during his term of office. This was quite something in those days, considering the events of the past. Edward Elworthy, owner of Home Station, whose descendants still live and farm in the area. The parents of Bob Fitzsimmons, blacksmith and heavyweight champion of the world. His statue is at Strathallan Corner in central Timaru. Samuel Hewlings, government surveyor, surveyed government town in 1856 to be known as town of Timaru Bay. However, Rhodes Town, surveyed by Edwin Luff and consisting of 126 acres north of North Street, proved a much more favourable site for the early township. Henry Lecrenne worked in Littleton when George Rhodes asked him to establish a store in Timaru in 1857. He built Beverley, a large house in Whitey Road, the site of the present RSA. He went to England and returned to live at Craighead, the site of the present school. Janet Meikle, the victim of the first motorcar fatality in Timaru. She lost control driving down the driveway at their home and was pinned underneath. The passenger, Mr. Meikle, crawled to get help in spite of a broken hip. Captain Mills, appointed harbour master in 1866 and one of the many to be drowned on Black Sunday 1882 while attempting to save the city of Perth after she and the Benvenue were washed ashore on the rocks in a storm. Elizabeth Perry, she was born Elizabeth Wood, married George Rhodes in 1854 and they travelled to Timaru to live in the first house, Beach Cottage, at the bottom of George Street. 2 years later they moved to the Plains House at the Levels. George Rhodes died in 1864 and in 1867 she married Arthur Perry and lived at Beverley. Richard Turnbull served on the Provincial Council and was later an MP, built a large public hall in Stafford Street on the site of the present Theatre Royal. His son founded the firm D.C. Turnbull, grain and shipping agents. Samuel Williams, a whaler who arrived in 1839, informed George Rhodes about the suitability of the area for grazing sheep. He ran Timaru's first accommodation house in Rhodes' original cottage and later was a hotel keeper. His son William Williams, born in 1857, was the first European child born in Timaru. This shot shows the north end of Craig Avenue and the Basilica. This is another impressive building worth a visit. This avenue is now the town bypass. We are at the south end of Craig Avenue, originally called West Town Belt, looking at the Botanic Gardens. This garden was laid out at the southern end of Government Town, along with the hospital which fronted onto the gardens. The High Street that never was. This was to be the main street in Government Plan, south of North Street. Here we are standing in Alexandra Square, which was to be the town square of Government Town. This is the town square that never was. In this aerial shot, the High Street goes off to the left, and the Great South Road, now called King Street, goes diagonally through the town square. At the south side of the Century Pool is the site of the original jail, where the Rifle Club is now. The club rooms are perched on the foundations of the jail. It is interesting to note that in the 1860s and 70s, up to 10% of Timaru's population ended up in jail in any one year, which is indicative of the population and the lawlessness which prevailed at the time. Across the road are 2 stone houses, which accommodated officers from the prison. Standing in the grounds of the main school, looking towards the southwest, we can see the present hall. This was the site of the Timaru Public School, just north of North Street on Grey Road. This stone school was later demolished, and the bluestone building in Grey Road was the headmaster's residence. It and the schoolhouse were built along the lines of an English public school. We hope you've enjoyed our film about Timaru and are inspired to learn more about the history of the town. We've mostly talked about the sand and stone of Timaru, but scattered throughout the old photographs we noticed lots of people. Some posing shyly for this newfangled technology, others unaware the camera was there. These are our ancestors, our grandparents and their friends, who worked to make Timaru what it is today, one of New Zealand's best kept secrets.